Okay, in this video I'm going to have a look at how we might disable or delete the functions of an exhaust gas recirculation valve or an EGR valve in an EDC17 file. This is a file from VW Passat with an EDC17 ECU file. Now, the area we want is obviously the EGR area, so what I'm going to do is just look through here and see if we can spot something related to EGR. Now these look as if they might well be EGR type maps because they've got that sort of characteristic shape. If we go a little bit further, that one's a bit more obvious, and there's another one there. It look very much like EGR in 2D view. Have a quick look at a 3D view. That's got that sort of characteristic scoop shape that we associate with EGR in 3D, so it looks like we're in excuse me, the right area. Let's see if we can look a little bit further on. Now what I'm looking for is these two. Now there's very often several versions of this particular map, and there's very often several versions of that one. So whereas this file has got that and that, so very often there might be two or three of these and two or three of these. But the reason why I'm looking for these is because the maps that I'm interested in are these, and these hysteresis maps, these are EGR hysteresis maps, are very often close to these two. So in other words, you can very often find that this little collection of maps is just to the right or just to the left over here of these. Sometimes though they can be displaced quite a long way, so in other words they can be right down here somewhere closer to the EGR maps themselves, so they could be right down here, but usually they are fairly close to these two maps. Now we're interested in these because these are the maps that control whether the EGR valve will be open or closed and when, so in other words under what circumstances. Now this file happens to have 6 fairly obvious maps. You can see the peaks. If I move that right out of the way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now don't be fooled by that, because occasionally you'll find files where only 3 of these peaks show, or even only 2 of them show, so you don't have to find 6 peaks, but very often there are the remnants, in other words bits and pieces of where the 6 would have been originally. So you might have a peak there and then some scrap numbers followed by a peak and then some more scrap numbers. So very often you can identify 6 areas, but you may not see all 6 peaks. Now obviously you can't tell easily without looking at the text view, which, so if I go to text view, here they are again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first one, it's 14 addresses, and it looks like it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bits of sort of scrap data tagged on the end. This would suggest that the designers left room for this to be bigger than 14. You could get a 16 address map in there easily without disturbing the next one. So it's possible that they originally left space to have a 16, 16, 16 and so on, but only 14 addresses have been used there, 14 there, 16 there, 14 there, 14 again there, and 16 there. Now don't worry too much about the numbers. In other words, you might find one that's 8 addresses long, or 10 or 12 or something like that. So the fact that these are 14 and 16 doesn't matter, because it can vary quite a lot from file to file. Now traditionally or typically you may only need to turn 2 of these maps off, but without a DAMOS to tell you exactly which 2 to touch, it's not quite easy to be sure which ones to turn off. It's probable that what we've got here, although we can see 6 maps, we've probably got 3 maps, because what we've probably got is 2 sets of 3. 3 maps for normal running and 3 maps to be used during regeneration. So it may well be that we've got 3 maps that are being used when the car is just running normally, and then the other 3 are only going to be used when regeneration occurs. Now, because it's not easy to tell which is which, the simplest thing to do is just switch them all off. And the way to switch them all off is to set the output values to 0. So if we go and highlight all of those output values and type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and enter. Yes, I do want to do that. Don't ask me again. Okay, right, now I've set those all to 0. If I go to the next map, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, set those to 0. Go to the next one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, set those to 0. Next one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, set those to 0. Next one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, set that one to 0, and then lastly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I've set all 6 maps to 0, so all the output values are 0, so the EGR valve won't open. Now if we look at that in 2D view, we get a reminder at the top here, a blue blob, to say that we've set these to a value lower than they were previously, because it'd have to be lower because we've set them to 0. And you may just be able to see there's a little flat line there, which is the zeros. Little flat line there, little flat line there, again there, there and there. Of course, it's not easy to see because the original values are still there quite obviously, so it's quite difficult to make out the zeros at the bottom, but obviously in 2D view we can see them clear as anything. Now, because we've done that, whatever the circumstances are for these maps cease to be there. So in other words, if one of these maps was for higher quantities of injection or lower quantities of injection or a change in air pressure or a change in temperature, it doesn't matter because we've set the values to 0. So under whatever that condition is, the EGR valve is still going to stay shut. And we've done that for all of these maps. So the EGR valve will in effect stay shut. Now, shut doesn't mean shut completely, because shut can mean a small amount of EGR remains open. This varies from car to car. So 0 doesn't actually always mean 0, but as far as we are concerned, 0 is 0. You occasionally get cars where there is something like 4% recirculation when the thing is set to 0, but it really doesn't matter. It's close enough for us to say to ourselves, yes, that's 0. And because we've set these to 0, if there were any errors being flagged previously about inconsistent flow or flow too high or flow too low, if we turn those errors off with something like VCDS so that they're not there now, and then we modify the file to all zeros like we've just done with this, from now onwards there will be no expected flow, in which case the deviation from the no expected flow will not make any difference at all, and so we shouldn't get any errors reported. If you had errors to do with the EGR that were for electrical faults, they will continue to be reported because those are nothing to do with airflow. They are to do with testing of the cables, and that's a completely different issue. If you do get any airflow issues after you've turned these off, then you may well have to dig around in this file somewhere and switch off those errors totally separate to the actual EGR. But basically, once you've set these to 0, the EGR should no longer be working in that file, and so the EGR for that car should now be off. Right, I hope that's enough information to allow you to make a change for yourself. So I'll stop there.